Thank you all for coming. I've been giving this year for many years. Actually, this is the 40th year that it's a long time. It's the 40th year that I'm giving a shir on the Yahrtzeit of the Ramchal. And it's a long time and so on and so forth. And the reason why I'm giving a shir specifically in his honor, because in a certain sense, he had the most profound influence on my hashkafas. You know, hashkafa is a very difficult topic, and there's really very little written in terms of hashkafa that was written by Gedolim and so on. And what the Ramchal did, and I will explain this shortly, is that he attempted to explain a hashkafa in a certain way, and his Derech Hashem is probably the most profound book ever written on hashkafa in the way that he sequences the material. He organizes it structurally in a certain way where one topic follows another topic logically, and he covers the entire hashkafa. And in a certain way, he had a profound influence on my fundamental understanding of hashkafa. So in 1982, I think it was, we decided to make a shir on his Yahrtzeit in his honor. So each year that I've given this shir, which is this is the 40th year, I always give a different shir. And I try and make it a very good one to honor him in this way. The shir that I'm going to speak about tonight is somewhat different. The shir itself will be given as a very advanced shir, and I hope that I can be zocher to explain it exactly as it comes out. There's a possibility that some of you may understand it, some of you may not. But be that as it may, it's a very good haskalah to understand certain critical issues that I don't believe has ever really been discussed. And what I really want to discuss, the concept of tonight, is a Kabbalistic concept. But I'm not going to be teaching Kabbalah tonight. What I will be discussing is what the Kabbalah includes and doesn't include, and why it includes and doesn't include it. So I'm kind of going to run about it in a certain way to explain it in a very deep level. And I think I'm going to be able to reveal a lot which a lot of people don't know. So I would ask you to hear clearly what I'm saying and make every attempt to understand it as best as possible. Fundamentally, what I'm going to talk about tonight is the Nun Sharei Bina, the 50th gate of Torah, to try and understand fundamentally what it is and how it is. The Torah is said to be given in 50 gates, Nun Sharei Bina. And what it clearly said is that the 50th gate, the last one, has never been revealed in a really an important way. What is the Nun Sharei Bina? What is the 50th gate? Fundamentally, what the 50th gate is, it's the light of Mashiach himself. In other words, when the Mashiach comes, what's the main thing that he will do? So the pasuk says, and the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of God, like the waters cover the sea. Well, the interesting question is, how is he going to do that? How will he be able to accomplish suddenly revealing the emes of the Rabbanu Shalom when this has never really been done before? The world has always been filled with apikosim, with minim, people who are secular and so on, and it's never been filled with people who are ma'aminim, who are believers. But how is the Mashiach going to be able to convince in a definite way the existence of God? So the way we understand it is through the weapon of the Nun Sharei Bina. The Nun, the 50th gate of Torah, is a certain level of light. It's a certain level of comprehension which has never been given to mankind. And it says, it describes it, when the Torah describes this thing, it uses the term O Chodosh. And the Pasuk O Chodosh al Tzion Toir v'niske chulonim v'oro. What is that O Chodosh? A new light. What is that referring to? And fundamentally what it's referring to is the Nun, the 50th gate. And that's considered the light Mashiach. And what does it mean that it's a Chodosh? It says, Ein Chodesh Dover Tachas HaShomesh. There's nothing new. And you cannot, the Torah that was given to us on Matan Torah is the same Torah that we have today. So why does the Pasuk call this a new light? What does it mean, a new light? So fundamentally, what this light is, it's not really so much a new, but it's a completely new way of looking at the Torah. Unfortunately, most people think that when the Mashiach comes, what will change? What will change, people believe, is everyone is going to be learning, and probably everyone thinks that they will be learning Gemara, the standard curriculum of all yeshivas today, and all yeshivas fundamentally for the last 2,000 years. Gemara, Mishnayos, Tosefta. I mean, what they learn today, but they'll be able to learn it better. But the truth of the matter is, that's completely untrue. No longer will you learn Gemara or any of these Sifrei Halacha. Why not? Because the Ikar that you'll be learning or will be taught to you is a certain hashkafa that is so deep, it will give you a certain kind of information that you never had before. And what is this information? The information is the concept of connections. What do I mean by connections? Each one of us goes through life. You know, we go through life, we meet different people, we have different friends, we live in different places, different addresses. We get married to a certain person and not to someone else. We have certain children. We get certain jobs and certain jobs we don't. A life is filled with a variation of events, of people, of family, of a job, and many, many things and so on. If you ever ask yourself the question, why? Why is it that the woman I married is the woman I married? What determines this? Why do I have certain friends and not others? Why are the circumstances of my life different in one way from another person? In other words, there's no real rhyme or reason, no true understanding of what happens to you in your life. We have emunah and we have betochen, and we believe that fundamentally, whatever the Baruch Hashem does is good. That in the end, it's will be good for us. We have that emunah. And when something bad happens to us, we make a bracha dayan emes. That fundamentally the Baruch Hashem knows what he's doing, and he's a true judge. The Baruch Hashem never gives any kind of yisurin or any kind of pain if a person hasn't earned that pain. That's what we believe, and that's the fundamentals of emunah. But do we know what's going on? Do we really understand why my life or any life of any one of you is constructed in that way? No, you have no understanding. And even when the Moshe Rabbeinu or the Malachim said to the Baruch Hashem, why do tzaddikim suffer so much? Why is human history filled with enormous amounts of pain? That's one of the biggest kashas that people ask on the Baruch Hashem. And that really is the main cause of people who have no emunah. The main taina that people have against God is simply this. Not that they don't believe in God because they don't know if he exists. That's very foolish. Everybody knows that God exists. How do they know it? Look at the universe. The universe is estimated, just for example, to have in the Milky Way galaxy, which is the collection of stars in our neighborhood. Astronomers estimate there are 100 billion stars, each star at least the size of the sun. which is almost 1 million miles in diameter. Can you imagine that? 100 billion stars. And then when they look at other collections of stars or other galaxies, they estimate that the universe as an entirety has how many galaxies do you think? Well, the number they estimate is 2 trillion. That means the number of stars in the universe, if you would count them all, is 1 with about 21 zeros after it. That number is enormous. And all of this is created by the Rebbeinu Shalom. The Rebbeinu Shalom is the creator, and he's the manig of every star, every planet, every asteroid, every comet in the entire universe. So there's nothing equivalent to this staggering concept of what the Rebbeinu Shalom created. So any Bas Seichel knows that there's a God. These things don't come from random. They don't come from some circumstance that's unpredictable. But why do they have such a problem believing in God? And the main reason, because they don't understand that the Rebbeinu Shalom's justice. Because fundamentally, everyone believes that a God has to be good. You know what I mean? He has such power and such enormous power that he would be good. He would give only goodness and wonderful experiences to anything he creates. So if you examine human history and you study human history, when you examine all the wars that mankind have gone through, all the machloikis between different people, even each of you has in some way a machloikis with your family or with friends and so on. And all of these incidences are all covered with pain. The greatest thing besides the number of stars in the universe is the amount of pain, simple pain that everyone feels in one level or another throughout his life. Yet we have no understanding of this. We just believe that the Rebbeinu Shalom is doing something, in a certain way, and that he knows why he's doing it. But those people who have questions about it say, therefore I don't believe in God. So what does the Nun do that it convinces everybody that there is a Rebbeinu Shalom, and the Rebbeinu Shalom is a Dayan Emes. He knows what he's doing in every instance of what he does. What is this chokmah? Because the Rebbeinu Shalom will teach you with this new Or Chodesh the concept of connections. In other words, very simply, what connection? Why you have your friends, the depth of the kesher and the connection that you have with each of the people that you know. Why you have this family, why you have this wife, why you have your children, and the connections of everything in your life, you suddenly will understand the complete plan, the program of your life, exactly why the Rebbeinu Shalom does this. And how do we know this? Because this is what it says at the end of Kodesh. Al kol davar ne'elam yovav b'mishpat. Everything which is now completely hidden, which appears completely random, will be revealed. And suddenly you will have a complete light on why everything happens to you. So therefore, I call the Nun Shari Bina, the 50th gate, a light of connections. It tells you every connection that you have in this Gilgul, in all reincarnations. You will know the why, not only the what. And this information is contained in the 50th gate and will be revealed by the Mashiach. So you can imagine, you will also understand why there are every star, why the Rebbeinu Shalom made this star. What's the purpose of the stars? We don't have any idea what it is, and so on. I can give a different share on that. But we will understand the existence and the presence of everything in the universe in existence. And this is the 50th gate. Now the Rebbeinu Shalom wanted to give the 50th gate to Adam Rishon, the first man, before he sinned. Because this was the reward of Adam. It was a kind of inyan of haskalah. If Adam Rishon would be zoicha to understand suddenly what the meaning of everything in his life, and he would reach the madrega of the Amoisa Mashiach. In other words, in the actual truth, who was the first Mashiach? Well, I don't know if you know, the first Mashiach, and was supposed to be the only Mashiach, was Adam Rishon. The Mashiach is nothing more than the fundamental Zulasai. And Zulasai means that being which is outside of God, who he intends to bring to Olam Haba. The Hashkafa calls that Zulasai. And Adam Rishon was the first and only Zulasai. And he was supposed to be Zoicha to that or if he would have kept the mitzvah. But he didn't keep the mitzvah. So therefore, his neshama was fragmented into what became mankind itself. From one man, Adam Rishon, his neshama was fragmented into pieces. And suddenly, the neshama of every person who ever lived on the planet Earth, whether it's Jews or whether it's Goyim, no matter who it is, if you take that, all those neshamas, billions and billions of neshamas, and fuse it into one neshama, that is Adam Rishon Koydem Achet. So he was astounding on his level. And had he kept the mitzvah of the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, the shmir of that mitzvah, he would have been Zocha to the Nun. God then would have told him why he does all that he does. Not of course, God would not reveal to him why he does what he does as a God that we cannot know. But he would suddenly understand why his life was what it was, and so on and so forth. So God confiscated the Nun from Adam Rishon and decided not to give it at all. And fundamentally, God confiscated the Nun Sharabina from all the Toras, the Dor Mabul, the Dor Floga, the Dor of the Ovis. And when did he decide to give it? By Matan Torah. You see, Matan Torah is something that a lot of people don't know. Matan Torah was supposed to reveal on Shavuos, was supposed to reveal the Torah. What Torah? The Torah that was supposed to be revealed on Shavuos was the Nun Sharei Bina. It is not the Torah that we have today, the Chamishi Chumshi Torah or the Tanakh. It's not that. The Rebbeinu Shem had no intention of revealing that Torah. What was the Torah at Matan Torah? When Moshe Rabbeinu went up to the Har, it was supposed to be the Nun. Which means that the Rebbeinu Shem had the intention from Matan Torah onward for Klal Yisrael, that would have been the Yemos HaMashiach. What we lost on Matan Torah because of the Chet of the Egel was not simply a type of Torah. We lost the Yemos HaMashiach. Who would have been the Mashiach? Well, Moshe Rabbeinu. The tachlis of Mashiach is to bring the Torah out of the Golus and out of the Klippas and give it to Klal Yisrael in a certain way. And this was what Moshe Rabbeinu was about to do. Moshe Rabbeinu was not satisfied with himself that he was the Ava Navim. He was the greatest Navi of all time. You figure he's the greatest Navi of all time, and he can communicate with the Rebbeinu Shalom, mamash per. You think it's be a high madrega. It is a high madrega, but it's not the highest madrega. Because as Moshe Rabbeinu would have become suddenly a Mashiach, he would have been knowledge. He would have had knowledge of something new, something different. It's called Haskalah. The knowledge of the Mashiach is not based on Navoor. The Mashiach, there are two of them, Mashiach ben David and the Mashiach ben Yosef. That knowledge comes from Haskalah. It doesn't come from Navoor. In other words, it's a knowledge of why everything is connected and why everything happens. But it's a knowledge that comes from logic and a deep understanding automatically from the Shekhinah itself. It's much higher than Matan Torah. Because what the Torah says about the awe of Mashiach, the Torah says, Hine Yaskel Avdi, that when the Mashiach leaves the Klippas and he leaves the Golus, V'yoram, he will be greater than Avram Avinu. V'nosa, he will be greater than Moshe Rabbeinu. And it says after that, V'gova Miyoid. Well, if you're bigger than Avram Avinu, and you're bigger than from Avram, and you're bigger than Moshe Rabbeinu, who's left? The one who's left is the Malachi HaShoras, that the Mashiach, while he's a physical human being, will have a greater understanding of Torah and everything that the Rebbeinu Shem was doing than all the Malachi HaShoras. which means that his information gained through Haskalah, not Navoor, is unmatched. So therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu was supposed to be the first Mashiach, and he would be Zercha to Haskalah, higher than Navoor. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't wait till he got to Mount Torah, to the mountain, to gain this Or Chodesh. So what happened? Well, the Baruch Shem would have given the 50th gate to Moshe Rabbeinu. He would have become the Mashiach, and specifically the Mashiach ben Yosef at that time, and Klal Yisrael would have started the Emoisa Mashiach. Not what happened now, because of Klal Yisrael, because they did the Chet of the Egel. They missed the whole thing. The Baruch Shem decided to retract the Emoisa Mashiach and to give Klal Yisrael a new Torah on Yom Kippur. So 40 days later, Moshe Rabbeinu went again up the mountain, and he received a new set of luchas, not the luchas Rishonis, which is called the Torah B'tzuz HaKeser, but the Torah B'tzuz HaChochma, the luchos Shnius, and that's the Torah that we have today. But it was not the original Torah that the Baruch Shem wanted to give us, and so on. So that's what Klal Yisrael lost in the Chet of the Egel. Before Moshe Rabbeinu died, the Baruch Shem showed him all the Toras that would come. And while he was seeing all the different Toras, he saw a man up ahead, at least 1,000 years up ahead, more like 1,300 years up ahead. And he saw this man learning in the Beis Medrash and teaching his Talmidim certain types of limudim. And he said to the Baruch Shem, "What is this?" The Medrash says. What he's asking, he said, "What is this?" This man who was a Tana, what this man was doing was learning hundreds of halachas, tremendous parts of the Torah in its panemius, and he was able to learn the halachas from the Tagin. There are certain letters that have crowns on them, and from these crowns he was able to learn thousands of halachas. So Moshe Rabbeinu said to the Baruch Shem, "I can't do this. I don't know how to do this, and I'm the one who's receiving the Torah. Who is this man?" And this man was none other than Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef. The Olam doesn't really know who Rabbi Akiva was. Why? Because the ability to learn halachas and yediyas from the Tagin on the letters of the Torah is part of the awe of Mashiach. It's part of the Nun Sharebina. So what Moshe Rabbeinu realized, wait a minute, I'm wanting to give him the Matan Torah, but this man, Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef, he has the awe of Mashiach itself. That means he is a living Mashiach. This is not an also ran, someone who's going to be Mashiach. He arrived at the Messianic level. So he said to the Baruch Shem, "You have such a man like this, who actually is a living Mashiach, and you give me the Torah?" So the Baruch Shem gave him a Torah. Yes, but you're the only one who could figure out the halachas l'Moshe Sinai, and we have what to speak on them, but I don't want to deviate from that and so on. But the Baruch Shem said, "Gezerim min afanai." I choose each person to do a certain tachlis. So Moshe Rabbeinu knew that Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef was the Mashiach. He was the Mashiach ben Yosef. So what happened to him? So Moshe Rabbeinu said, "What happens to this man? He's Mashiach, but does he bring the Yemos Mashiach?" And the answer was no. Why? Why not? Because the Yemos Mashiach is what? Cannot come when Klal Yisrael has too much sinas chinam. And why is that? Why is sinas chinam such an avera that it prevents the Yemos Mashiach from happening, even when there exists in the world a man who has the full ability to become the Mashiach? And the answer to this is very simple, but it's also somewhat unknown. Klal Yisrael, every Jew in Klal Yisrael is not simply a member of a certain club. He's not simply a Yehudi. But Klal Yisrael is fundamentally an organism. What is an organism? An organism is a body that's composed of different parts, each of the parts contributing to the task which the whole body has to do. So therefore, I have a liver, I have a heart, I have a brain, I have different organs in my body. But my body is an organism, because each of these organs, even though they have a different task, fundamentally, they all have fundamentally one task: to keep me alive and to keep me going. And when you have a lot of different components all acting in the same theme to do the same thing, that's called an organism. And there's no such thing as a stranger in an organism. An organism has no strangers. So even though my liver, the cells in my liver will never see the cells in my heart, because there are different locations in the body. But yet the cells in my liver know every one of those cells in my heart. Every cell in your body knows every other cell. And how do I know that's true? There's no such thing as a stranger in an organism. How do I know that's true? Because when you give a person a transplant, because he needs a new organ, because let's say he has a liver problem and his liver has a cancer on it, they have to remove that liver and put in a new liver from another person. And if you put in a liver from another person into a person's body, you know what the body does? It rejects it. What do you mean it rejects it? You need a liver, so I'm giving you a liver from Chaim Yaakov. So the body says, it says to you, I don't want that liver. Why? Because that's not my liver. What? The body knows the concept of my liver? What difference does it make? I need a liver. No, the body says, I only will accept your liver. So that for the rest of your life, your body tends to reject that liver, although you will die without that liver, because there is no such thing as a stranger. The body as an organism knows every piece of it, every component. Exactly. So that's what the Bnei Shem says about Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael is not simply a bunch of people in a minyan. Klal Yisrael is an organism. The only reason why people don't know each other, because I took away the knowledge of each other. So they don't know, therefore, each other. They think they're strangers and so on. But really, everyone knows everybody. When you become spiritual as a neshama, you will automatically recognize every neshama, even though you've never met before. So because of the fact that Klal Yisrael was noeg, conducted themselves with such sinas chinam at the time of Rabbi Akiva said, even though I'm the Mashiach, we will not have a Yemos Mashiach. Why? Because the sinas chinam which Klal Yisrael has will destroy the organismic relationship that it has. And when Klal Yisrael destroys its organismic relationship, it lacks its unity. And therefore it no longer becomes a mamlechas kahanim. It cannot be representative of Bnei Shem to the Umas Olam. So therefore Rabbi Akiva therefore failed. But how did Rabbi Akiva get the Nun Sharabina? How did he do that? Well, what I believe he did that is simple. It says, Dalad nichnesu lepardes. There were 4 tanoim that went into the garden. That's what it says. And 3 of them had a terrible accident that happened. One died, one Tana became what? An apikos, and one Tana became somewhat mentally disturbed. The only Tana that came out from that pursuit was Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef. It says, Nichnas b'sholem v'yotza b'sholem. He was the only one that came out alive and well. Ben Zoyma died, Ben Azai went to Blu Meshigina, and Ache, Elisha ben Abuya, suddenly he became a min. The only one that came out normal was so the question is, well, if I try and study a subject and I'm not matzliach on the subject, do I become nuts? Or do I die? You know what I mean? What is this? I become a min just because I don't understand the textbook or some sort? So what kind of chokhmah was Pardes that they were after? We ask ourselves, what were they trying to find out? And I believe the answer was the Nun Sharabina. They were trying to understand the 50th gate, which was that time coming down to the world. Because the Rebbeinu Shalom decided in the year 4000, it says in the year 2000 years after the Bris Olam was a door of Tohu, was a kuf of Tohu. In the year 4000, 2000 years later, was what? Not a door of Torah, but the door of Torah. But the last 2000 years until the year 6000, and we are now in the year 5782, we're almost there, will be what? Will be the Yahrtzeit Mashiach. What? But there is no Mashiach. No Mashiach has come. You're completely mistaken. We are actually in the Yahrtzeit Mashiach itself. That's right. If you examine what has happened historically in the last 2000 years, you will quickly see that we are not in the normal way. We are actually in the Yahrtzeit Mashiach, which is in Golus. That's what we're living in, and so on and so forth. Which means that the Rebbeinu Shalom decided to give the nun down, even though it would not be in the Yahrtzeit Mashiach. In other words, it would be a Yahrtzeit Mashiach with the nun, but it would not be begoloi, it would be hidden. But the Rebbeinu Shalom decided to bring it down, and Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef knew how to take that nun, the 50th gate. Where did he take it from? Because when Moshe came down from the mountain, the Luchos Rishonis, and he broke the tablets, and he put it in Yoren. And when he went up the second time, up the mountain on Yom Kippur, and he brought down the second Torah, he put the Luchos Shivuras, the broken tablets of the Nun, into the Torah that we have. But no one knows how this works. In other words, the Nun Sharei Bina, the Or Mashiach, is now with us. Has been with us since Moshe Rabbeinu broke the first tablets, and he put that Chokhmah, he put it into the Torah that we have now, that was given to him on Yom Kippur. That's right. So where was the Nun? The Nun was in the Torah itself, in the Chamisha Torah that we possess. And Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef knew how to take it out. And he knew, because that's what it means. He went into Pardes and he was successful. So therefore, the last Mashiach who will come doesn't have to go up to Har Sinai again and bring down the Nun. Moshe Rabbeinu had to go up to get the Nun, but the last Mashiach who will complete the task doesn't have to bring down the Nun anymore, because the Nun is with us. And Rabbi Akiva knew how to pull it out of the Chamisha Chumshei Torah. That's how he got the Nun, and that's how he became Mashiach. But he couldn't He couldn't bring the Yahrtzeit Mashiach because of Sinas Chinam. So what does this mean, that he couldn't bring the Yahrtzeit Mashiach? What does this mean? What did Rabbi Akiva know about the Nun? We don't know what he knew. We don't know exactly. We have never seen the 50th gate. And the 50th gate will be so far above anything that you learn or anything that you know, that you cannot even believe that this Chokhmah is available. So what did Rabbi Akiva, what did he finally realize? So he realized fundamentally that he has a Nun as a nimshal. He understood the concepts of the Nun clearly. It was golly to him. But since he wasn't able to bring the Yahrtzeit Mashiach, what happened was he told his Talmud, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, who then also learned the Nun from Rabbi Akiva as a nimshal, and he said, I want you to hide the Nun. I want you to hide it in terms of Mishalom. What's a mashal? A metaphor. What's a metaphor? A symbol. So he told Rabbi Shimon to hide the Nun, which now is called the Kabbalah, and to write it in the Sefer of Zohar. Well, he actually didn't write the Zohar. His Talmud Rabbi Abba wrote it. But he translated the Nun Sharei Bina in terms of Mishalom, in metaphors or symbols. Nobody really understands the Kabbalah. That's right. Nobody really understands it. Because the Kabbalah talks about symbols. For example, there's one inyan in Nun Sharei Bina, which is the inyan of the 50th gate, which is the inyan of certain lights. It talks about the light that comes from the forehead, and the light that comes from the eyes, from the ears, from the nose, and from the mouth. And it talks about this light in terms of certain spheres that it produces. But what does this mean? What does this mean? Coming from the eyes, the ears, the nose. We don't know what this means. This is the mashal that the Kabbalah is written in. But the Kabbalah was the actual Nun of Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef, who knew the Nimshal, but told Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai to hide it. So people sometimes why is it people go to Meron on his Yahrtzeit of Rabbi Shimon? Why are they celebrating it? The truth of the matter is, Rabbi Shimon did not reveal the Kabbalah. He hid the Kabbalah. Because the Was the Mashiach went into Golus. So the Nun went back into Golus also. And the Golus of the Nun is Kabbalah, and it's the Zohar, and it's Meshalom, which nobody really understands. After Rabbi Shimon did this, the Nun was converted again with the third member, the second member really, the Ari. And the Ari was Megala the Kabbalah and expanded on the Mashal. The Ari did not explain the Nun at all, which was contained in the Kabbalah. He didn't. So the Ari never revealed the Or of Mashiach, or the 50th gate. He expanded the mashal, or the metaphor. He disguised it. But the Ramchal, who was after the Ari, was the first one who had permission to begin to reveal the Nimshal. It's fundamentally only from the Ramchal that we have an ability to understand to some degree the Nimshal of that. That means the Ramchal was Zocher to understand the Nimshal, what the Or of Mashiach was actually referring to, the Nun Sharebina. So that's why the Ramchal is very special. Not only was the Ramchal a Mokobol, this is not his godless, and he was a Murdik Tamar Chacham, that's not his godless. And he was a Meshunidik Tzaddik, that's not his godless. The godless of the Ramchal, that he was the first man since Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef who had permission to begin to reveal the Nimshal of the Kabbalah, which is the Nun Sharebina. But has the world taken that up? No, really. People don't learn the Ramchal really in yeshivas. You know, they don't really learn the Derech Hashem or Das Tvunos. They don't concentrate on that. But that's a tremendous mistake, because the Sifrei Ramchal is really Megala, the Nun Sharebina. And that's what they have it is, and so on and so forth. So we see this entire thing going on. But there's certain things that Kabbalah is not Megala. It's not Megala, even what you understand it. And the question is why. The question is why. And what do I mean that it's not Megala, the actual parts of the Nun? When you learn the Kabbalah, you're really learning about certain topics. You're learning about the spheres and the olamas and the interactions of the spheres with each other. So you're learning about the entire tikkunim of the spheres. The spheres are nothing more than hanogas. Chesed, Din, and Rachamim. Chesed, Din, and Rachamim is represented by 10 spheres. They're energies that represent the Hanhoga, the Derech Hashem of Chesed, Din, and Rachamim. And therefore, what's learned is the interaction of all the spheres with each other. And that's fundamentally what the Hanogas are. And that's fundamentally what Kabbalah is. But the Kabbalah ignores something which is very profound. What it ignores is the Zulosai. It doesn't say much about the Zulosai. It doesn't really say much about the position of the Zulosai amongst all the spheres in terms of receiving Chesed, Din, and Rachamim. And what do I mean by that? The concept of the Zulosai is the true recipient of Olam Haba. That's right. The one who has to go to Olam Haba, the Kavanah of the Bonisham and the Bria, was to take the Zulosai, which fundamentally we see as a neshama, and put that neshama in Olam Haba. But what the Bonisham has to do first is to take that Zulosai and put him into a physical universe. So now only is he a subject to Chesed, Din, and Rachamim, but he has a certain task. The Bonisham wants the Zulosai to do certain mitzvahs, so that if he does these mitzvahs, this avodah, he will be zocher to Olam Haba. But the question is why? Why does the Bonisham want us people to do mitzvahs. He doesn't need the mitzvahs. He himself doesn't require anything that we do. He doesn't benefit from anything that we do. So the bottom line is, what is the purpose of the mitzvahs? And there are very few people who really understand it. But the term that's used to describe this obligation is called Nam D'Ksufa. Now, Nam D'Ksufa is really not mentioned at all in Shas, except in Pei Yerushalmi, in certain places. And Nam D'Ksufa means bread of shame. But what exactly is that? Because what the Torah tells us is that because of the problem of Nam D'Ksufa, because of this problem, the person has to do Taryag mitzvahs. So the whole reason why the Baruch Shem made a spirit universe, made the spheres and made a spirit universe, and then he made a physical universe, is to give a person free will to choose in doing the mitzvahs. And the reason why he has to do the mitzvahs is to masaken Nam D'Ksufa. But the question is, what exactly is Nam D'Ksufa? What is it? Does anyone really know what Nam D'Ksufa is? So the Ramchal says one line in Derech Hashem, he says a certain paragraph, what he defines as Nam D'Ksufa. Nam D'Ksufa is a feeling of embarrassment. Busha. Ksufa means busha, Nama means bread. And Nam D'Ksufa means bread of shame. And the person is embarrassed if he's given something which he does not earn himself. If a person gets a gift from someone and gives it to him, since the person did nothing to earn this gift or produce this gift, this person has a hard time accepting the gift. That's what the Gemara in Yerushalmi says. That's what it actually says. Nam D'Ksufa is a certain embarrassment that you have when you're given something that you didn't do anything to get. You didn't do anything to deserve. And when you get this thing, you accept it, but there's a certain embarrassment that you don't really believe that you deserve to do it. That's how we defined it. But when you think about it, there's a certain question, a very profound question that has to do with Nam D'Ksufa. And what's that question? Nam D'Ksufa itself is a creation from God. Why is a person embarrassed if he receives something that he didn't earn? Why? Because the Baruch Shem made him embarrassed. That itself is part of the Brias Olam. The Baruch Shem gave us the feeling to be embarrassed, fundamentally, if we don't earn something. So we can't claim it through ownership. But that itself is from the Baruch Shem. So why does the Baruch Shem have to give us something and then have us take it away? Don't give it to me and I don't have to take it away. It's very simple. So what do I have to prove? What am I proving by doing all the mitzvahs? Why couldn't the Baruch Shem give me Olam Haba? That's it, as a gift. He is God and he has the power to give his Olam Haba, which is eternity. So why doesn't he do it from the outset? Why does he create this embarrassment and then tell me that you got to get over this embarrassment by earning it? So I say to him, well, don't give me Nam D'Ksufa and I don't have to do this. Now the question becomes much worse, because if you don't do the mitzvahs, there are punishments, serious punishments. Everything from Dalad Mises Bezin to Toras to Makas and so on. So this is not a game, this is not a joke. In other words, if I don't do the mitzvahs that the Baruch Shem tells me, I'm going to get really slapped in the face and I'm going to have a life of suffering in one of my Gilgulim. That's a fact. So the question to the Baruch Shem is, don't give me this Nam D'Ksufa problem which you gave me and you expect me to get over it by doing the mitzvahs, by doing your will, and that's the end of the story. So the fundamental question of Nam D'Ksufa is this: we don't understand what it's all about. Now, I don't know if anyone has ever thought about it, but if you're an honest person and you have to work hard for something, you have to work hard doing something that's not even necessary. So why does God make me do it? And there's no real answer given to this question. Not really. And the Kabbalah doesn't even discuss this. This is part of the Nun that's not even discussed. So in other words, the main idea of the Bria, the main idea of creation, of why the Baruch Shem created the world, why he made man, why he gave mitzvahs, and what he expects him to do, is not even discussed fundamentally in the Kabbalah. And this is a very big mystery. So not only is the chasson of the 50th gate that's given to us without understanding it, because it's all mishalom, it's all metaphors and symbols, but the fundamental issues of the Kabbalah are not even discussed. Because the most important issue in Kol HaTorah Kula is not the mitzvahs, is not the neshamas, it's not even Olam Haba. The most important issue is, why do I have to work to get Olam Haba? Who am I working for? I have to fear God? Does He need me to fear Him? Does He require this? Of course not. The Organism exists alone and by Himself, way before anything was created, even before there was time. So therefore, what is this all about? So the truth is, I challenge everyone to answer that question. And if you can't answer that question, you don't understand the fundamental principle of what Kol HaTorah Kula is based. Simple. If you can't answer this question. And the Kabbalah, the Nun Sharei Bina in its form of mashal, will not answer you. In fact, from the Ari himself, the Ari actually places some kind of an issa that in order to answer this question, we have to go to a level of Kabbalah, which is what's called before Tzimtzum. Before the Baruch Shem created the world, the problem of Nam L'Ksufa already existed. That means Nam L'Ksufa is a certain problem that exists in the Neshama. But it is a problem that is so fundamental that the Baruch Shem, in a certain sense, Kaviyochel, had to give it. He had no choice, because when he created the Adam as a Neshama, automatically at the same time, he created the problem of Nam L'Ksufa. Therefore, he says to the Adam, you have to remove it. You have to remove your Nam L'Ksufa, or else you can't go to Olam Haba. I can't even save you. Because the whole tachlis of the mitzvahs is to masaken Nam L'Ksufa, so you shall not be embarrassed when you're in Olam Haba. But somehow this feature is so critical that it was created along with the Zulosai, along with the Adam. We have to say this, because if the Baruch Shem didn't have to give it to us, which of course we ask, He wouldn't have given it to us. The Baruch Shem is not here to miyasser an Adam, to make him work hard. It's like working in a mine, where you're working in a mine for some mineral and so on, and it's schwer Arbeit. And then you find out that the mineral that you're taking from deep underground has no shavias. So fundamentally, the most powerful question, and so of this, and there's no answer that's given to us. And it's true, most of you are kind of ignorant of this thing. You never ask the question, there's not much you know about it, and okay, you learn Gemara, you go through Torah, Kula. But as a thinking person, as a person who wants to do something which makes sense, this is the most important question. I've been asking this question for 40 years. Somehow I realized when I was much younger, when I was much younger, and when I first heard of Nam L'Ksufa, which is only mentioned once in the Yerushalmi, it's only mentioned once in the Zohar, very, and it's not even discussed in Kol HaTorah Kula, and surely it's not discussed at all with all its parameters, with the reasons for it. So I asked myself the question 40 years ago, what is this Nam L'Ksufa? Because this seems to be the fundamental will of Kol HaTorah Kula. And I think after 40 years, I kind of discovered what it was. And now I'm not 100% certain, and the Ramchal slightly hints to it, but this is the presentation I want to make tonight. To megala what Nam L'Ksufa is, and why it is so critical, why without Nam L'Ksufa there would be no Zulosai at all. You would not exist. So I've defined the fundamental task, what I'm going to try and do tonight. The truth is, there's a certain fact about the Ribono Shel Olam that you have to know. And I don't believe almost anyone knows this. It's called existence. I'm going to try and present a certain view, Kaviyachol, of the Ribono Shel Olam himself that will give us a certain grasp of who he is. It's possible to understand him on a much higher level if you put in the effort. When I say something exists, for example, this phone, what is this phone called? It's called in English an entity. The world is filled with many entities. Every object is called an entity. We say that the object exists. For example, on this table, cookies exist, recorder, watch, soda, people, chairs, table. Each of these things is called an entity. And when I say that it exists, what do I mean by that? And what I mean by that is that it has two bechinas, two ideas associated with it. First of all, every entity fundamentally, when you want to know what something is, the question you're asking is, what is this? And that means you're asking a question of what's called the essence of the thing. What is the essence of this? What's its definition? When I want to understand something, a word that I don't understand, what do? I look it up in a dictionary. And a dictionary tells me what the thing is. It describes it by its properties, by certain characteristics. You see, and that's called an essence. In Hebrew, the word essence is called mahus, which, by the way, does not exist in biblical Hebrew. Mahus is from medieval periods. Chazal they never coined the word mahus, which means essence and means the definition of it. They had a different name, which probably, I think from the word atzmutzai, but it's a different thing. So therefore, the first thing I have to do when I want to understand an entity is I have to understand its definition. What does the dictionary say that this is? You see it. Like, for example, man. What is a person? Could you give me the definition of a person? And I'm talking about thinking rigorously. I'm not talking about sloppy thinking. In order to say that you understand something, you have to say, I understand the essence of this thing. That's what you have to say. So I ask you, what's the definition of man? A person. What is a person? How would you define him? How would you write about him in a dictionary? So the way they do that, they say man is a rational animal. That's the definition of a man. Why is he called a rational animal? Every one of you sitting at this table, and everyone on the planet Earth is a rational animal. What does this mean? What do you mean you're an animal? An animal is defined as a form of life that has senses. It sees, hears, and so on. It smells. That's an animal. A plant is not an animal. It's a tzomeach. It grows, but it's not an animal. It doesn't have sense perception. It can't see, it can't smell, it can't hear. So an animal is a kind of living thing that has senses. It has a sense perception. But man, a person, has more than just senses. He can also think. That's why it's called rational. A person, therefore, is a being which is living. He has sense perceptions, and he also thinks. So that's the definition of a person. That's his mahus. That's his essence. Now, besides his essence, there's another feature of an entity. It also exists. In other words, if you say, for example, like let's say in the 1600s, if I would say a device, let's say a tape recorder, which records the human voice, and I'm living in the 1600s, and I described what happens if we make a machine that can record your voice. Now, is there a machine like that at the 1600s? No. No one ever made a machine like that. But does the idea exist? Yeah. In other words, you can create an idea, an essence, even though the thing does not exist. Like if I would define a tape recorder in the 1600s, then I would have that. So therefore, we see that something which exists, an entity, and has an essence, doesn't have to exist, but everything we see exists. So therefore, there's two things that can be said about every entity that has an essence and that it has a position in being. It participates in the process of being, of existence. Now, I can't define existence. That's a process which they're not subject to a definition. There's reasons for that. So therefore, every entity, like this tape recorder, it has an essence, it has a definition, but it also exists. But there's a strange relationship between the essence of the thing and the existence. The existence is a process which is added to the essence of this, because it doesn't have to exist. But if it exists, it participates in a process, like reading, walking, doing, some kind of process. There's some kind of a process called existence, which means that you exist, that you are, you participate in being. And then I add this process to the essence, and presto, I have the tape recorder. So the tape recorder is composed of two ideas: its essence, what it is, and its existence, that it is. That it is. In other words, right now, the essence of whatever this entity is participating in a process called being, existence. So existence is added to the essence, and presto, I have it. And this is true of everything that was ever made. Every entity is subject to the idea of existence and essence. But the two ideas are actually separate. But when something exists, the two ideas come together, and presto, the entity suddenly exists. Now, I'm sorry, this may be a little complicated. You normally don't think in these terms, but this is what it is. But the actuality is that there is another form of being, which has nothing to do with existence. That's right, there's a tremendous chiddush. I'm going to say a tremendous chiddush. It's very not easy to understand this. But I'm going to say a big chiddush, that there's another type of entity. That's right. What is that? For example, if you close your eyes, and suddenly, what do you realize? What are you become aware of? When you close your eyes and you're no longer seeing anything, and you're thinking with your mind what you know, what becomes visible suddenly? What becomes visible is your awareness. And what does the awareness? Something called a self. Now, what is a self? Well, I don't really know. No one has ever seen a self. A self is a kind of entity which is invisible. It doesn't even have a substance to it. It's called self, S-E-L-F. And that self, which is each one of you possesses a self. And that self is aware of itself. And I'm going to say to you that that awareness is its existence. That is the way it exists. It doesn't need existence. The self knows that it is, because it's aware. So therefore, awareness is not what you think, that, oh, I'm aware of this glass, I'm aware of this tape recorder, I'm aware of this watch. That's not what's going on here. The self is aware of itself because of its awareness. So that means that awareness, the concept of consciousness and awareness, is a form of being. So therefore, we see that there are two types of being. There's the being that comes from something called existence, and that's the process of being which is added to the essence of a thing. But there's another form of being that has nothing to do with existence as such, but that a person exists because he's aware that he exists. And that awareness gives him full knowledge of himself. So in a certain sense, he only has awareness. So I'm ready to say a tremendous chiddush. Awareness itself is a type of being. That the self only has awareness. Can you see a self? No, it's not a substance. Where is it? You don't see it. Scientists, they don't know what consciousness is. They don't know where it is. They don't know what it is. But the self is aware of itself. And what I'm saying is that's a kind of existence. I hope that you understand it. It's a very big chiddush. Now, why do I say this? Because this will give you a much easier way. You have to be prepared for this. If you want to understand who the Rebbeinu Shalom is, what's the problem? Why can't you understand who the Rebbeinu Shalom is? I mean, I'm not joking here. God is normally difficult to understand. But why? Because the Rebbeinu Shalom is a being who is only aware of himself. The Rebbeinu Shalom does not exist as we exist. There's no process that's added to his essence that makes him. Presto, he appears. Because there is nothing outside of him. When the Torah says, Eino id mulvadoi, what does that mean? Eino id mulvadoi. This is not a statement simply that there's no one else but him. And that's not even true, you see it. There's no one but him, but it's an implication that there could be something, but there is nothing. No, I don't use the term Eino id mulvadoi to describe the Rebbeinu Shalom. What I describe the Rebbeinu Shalom as Ein Od, that's it. The word Einoid. Einoid means there is nothing. Only God. That means that the Rebbeinu Shalom is a different type of being. He exists. He doesn't exist in reality. All of you have a reality. You are aware of things outside of yourself. There's me, and there's outside of me. The Rebbeinu Shalom has nothing outside. Einoid. He has no reality. Even better than that, how does the Rebbeinu Shalom know himself? He's aware. He has a self which gives him awareness. Kaviyachol, he is the Rebbeinu Shalom. But it's a self which is completely, has no shaykhus to reality. There's no such thing as an outside. It's pure self. And his awareness of himself is the same thing. He and his awareness are the same thing. It's identical. So therefore, he's so hard to understand. Why? Because he's so different than us. You see, we all exist because we have a process called existence that's added to the essence. He doesn't have that. That's not him. And that is a specific word. What is the Rebbeinu Shalom? The Rebbeinu Shalom is a subject. That's called a subject. Like there's a subject and there's an object. The Rebbeinu Shalom is not an object. He's not an entity that has a definition and has in addition a process of existence. No. The Rebbeinu Shalom is pure self, and he is aware of himself, and that's his existence. Now, did you ever see an entity like this? No, and you never will. We have never seen anything like the entity of what God is, because he doesn't exist like any of us. He is aware of himself. Is the Rebbeinu Shalom aware of himself? Does he know himself? Of course. But he exists in that awareness. And there's nothing outside of that awareness. There's no such thing as reality. There's no such thing as the word other. To the Rebbeinu Shalom, there's no such thing as other. In fact, I think even more than that. That the Rebbeinu Shalom has no will. The Rebbeinu Shalom cannot say the word I want. Why? He can't say the word I want. You can say, I want this, I want that. The Rebbeinu Shalom cannot really say this. Why? Because since he is beyond reality, he is everything. Everything is in him. There's nothing that he wants. He has no need. He has no want. In a certain sense, the Rebbeinu Shalom, he's called Atzmusai. God as he is, which is totally beyond our understanding, is called Atzmusai. The Kabbalah refers to him as Atzmusai, not Ein Sof. Atzmusai. It means Atzmusai means what? His substance, whatever he is. We have no comprehension of what he actually is. So therefore we see that there are two types of beings. There's a being which is existence, it manifests itself through existence, and there's a being that manifests itself through awareness. But the Rebbeinu Shalom is not even his awareness is not outside of himself, it's him. It's his identity. And we have no understanding what such an entity is. We can't even call him an entity. And that's why the Bnei Shem is God. You know why the Bnei Shem is God? Because he is a subject. Because he and his awareness are the same thing. There's nothing outside of him. That's why he's so powerful. He owns himself. He himself is himself. There's nothing outside. Now there's one other entity, one other being that was similar to him. That's right. There's something that is similar to the Bnei Shem. As difficult it is to understand who God is, there is another entity which is similar to him. But it's not him, but it's similar. And that's the pasuk, V'atchasreyu ma'at melakim. David HaMelech said, man, you're man, and you have the gift of self. You are aware of yourself. You know what kind of godless this is? You have to understand the godless of this. Every star in the universe, trillions and trillions of stars. When you look at the sun, for example, you admire it. It's huge. It's 800,000 miles in diameter. It's 50 million degrees in the center. It is an enormous thing. But who's greater, you or the sun? Well, you would say the sun. It's a tremendous entity. No, the sun does not know it's a sun. It's no self-awareness. He's an object. He's a non-living object. He doesn't know he is a sun. So when he looks at you, he doesn't look at you. He doesn't know what you are. You, however, you look at him, and you know, I'm looking at the sun. So therefore, the difference between a person and the sun is you have awareness. And this awareness is incredible, godless. This awareness comes from the Bnei Shem. In fact, the Bnei Shem didn't create you. You cannot create, really, something outside of yourself. If it's outside of yourself, it's not you. So how did the Bnei Shem make a human being, or the neshama, that knows himself? Because when the neshama talks to God, and he says, what does he say? He says, me, you. When he refers to God, he says, you. So he talks to God like God is outside of him. But God is not outside of him. God is inside of him. But he thinks that God is outside of him. So therefore, he sees the Bnei Shem as a duality, him and God. But the Bnei Shem is not a duality. He's the only thing. The Bnei Shem himself has no duality. There's nothing outside of him. So this is a mistake. And this mistake is performed by the bus of Adam, by a person. You see, even though you have awareness and you know that you are, but you're making a tremendous mistake because you think that when you know God, he's something outside of you. And that's how you relate to him. You relate to him by the word you. The Bnei Shem is not a you. He is not outside of him, and you're not outside of him. Because Einoid, he is everything, the beginning and end of everything. There is no outside of reality. But when you know yourself, what do you say? You say the expression, I know myself. That's what you say. You say, I know myself. No, think of that statement, I know myself. What is the I and what is the myself? Well, I refer to myself in two words. There's the I and there's myself. Well, I is me, that's me. Myself is me in reality. So in other words, when I'm conscious of myself, when I'm aware of myself, I know myself by my reality. And my reality is outside of me. You see, so even though I'm a human being and I am a subject, I am capable fully of self-awareness, similar to the Bnei Shem. I don't have his koiches because I have to refer to reality, myself. I am myself. I know myself. You know, I talk about myself like I'm two people. I'm I and myself. How does the Bnei Shem talk about himself? Doesn't. He simply says I. That's it, the word I. There's no such word as myself. There's no reality outside of him. He does not know himself in reference to a reality. So he's a completely different type of being. And that's his power. Einoid. There's nothing but him. Forever. Whereas me, there is something but me. Myself. I still have to know myself. And if we compare this to other things, like for example, you never thought of it, like a malach. Does a malach have self-awareness? Yes. Like if you're having a conversation with Rafael HaMalach, let's say you're having a conversation and he refers to himself. Does he have the same self as a human being? No. You have a much greater sense of self than the Rafael HaMalach. Why? Because a malach only knows himself in terms of his tachlis, his function. Rafael HaMalach is fundamentally has the function to heal. That's it. He knows the entire thing about healing, everything about healing. But that's all he knows, healing. Outside of the function of healing, he doesn't have a self. His self is the name. What's the name, the true name of a malach? What he does, like Rashi says, a malach is his function. If the malach has to do this shlichus, that's his name. So what does that mean, that's his name? That's where his sense of self-awareness is, with its function. Rafael HaMalach knows that he is the malach that does refuas. That's it. Outside of that, he doesn't have a sense of self. Now it's hard to understand it. He only knows himself in terms of his reality. That reality is very abstract. Or even take another malach. So therefore the self-awareness of a malach is much less than the self-awareness of a human. Because how does a human know? You don't know yourself by virtue of what you do, or your tachlis, or your function. You know yourself because you know yourself. You know the self that's in you purely as a self. Rafael HaMalach knows his sense of self only in terms of what he has to do. That's why that is his name. So his sense of himself is much less than your sense of yourself. You've never really realized that. He is confined by his task, and he knows himself through his task. Outside of his task, he doesn't exist. He disappears. So therefore, you are much greater than all the malachim put together. You have a true sense of self because you know yourself as you are, without doing anything, without being anything. You know, I'm Shimon. That's me. I'm not doing anything. I don't have any function. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not being anything. I'm me. A malach can't say it's me. I'm me. I'm not me. I am refuah. I am shlichus. He has to tell you what he does. You know, that's it. Without that, he doesn't have a sense of self. The malach then disappears. Let's say another thing. A cat. You know, does a cat know that he's a cat? Interesting question. We're talking about an animal. Does a cat know that he's a cat? The answer is yes, in a way. Why? Because when he's threatened with his life, he feels that he is threatened, the self is threatened. So he has some self-awareness. But that self-awareness of a cat is not independent. It's not separated. It's part of the animal world, the animal reality. He knows himself as part of a reality. But you are aware of yourself outside, almost outside of a reality, similar to the Bnei Shalom, except that the Bnei Shalom is not aware of himself. The Bnei Shalom is himself. It's tainuhach. You have a slight feeling that you know yourself. So you have a slight touch of reality, but it only touches you. But you're somewhat similar to the Bnei Shalom. And therefore you were never created. That's right. How were you made? You were derived. You know what it means to be derived? It means that one thing comes from another. The atzmusai derived the zulasai from him, from his own self-awareness. Atzmusai, from his own awareness of himself, derived, came out of that. He's a lower form of the Bnei Shalom. And that's what David HaMelech means, V'tchasreyu ma'at melokim. You are not like God in the sense that he is his own awareness. You are aware of yourself in your own reality, but that self is independent of everything else. A cat is only knowledgeable of himself. He knows himself in the world of reality of animals. A malach knows himself through his function, and that's all. So we see that there are much smaller self-awarenesses. But the greatest thing that was ever created with self-awareness is the Adam, man. And that's why you are so big. You see, none of us know, and this is very important, none of us know how great we are. And I have no doubt about that. You know, you think that you can become a Baal Gaiva. You think that you can be a Baal Gaiva. You can't even begin to be a Baal Gaiva, because you are much greater than any Baal Gaiva. And it's what I'm saying, you're undermining yourself. You're cheating yourself. You want to be a Baal Gaiva? Okay, be a Baal Gaiva, but be an emes of Baal Gaiva. Know what your greatness is, that you have self-awareness, and that self-awareness makes you exist. Certainly similar to the Bnei Shalom. So what's the problem? What is the problem? What is Nam L'Ksufa then? Nam L'Ksufa is this. Nam L'Ksufa is that the Bnei Shalom says to you in Olam Haba, you know what he says? He says, you call yourself me, but don't call me a you. I'm not a you. I'm not a you that's outside of you. I'm a you that's inside of you. So you really, what you should call me is inner me. There's me and there's inner me, something which is my foundation, which from who I get my self-awareness. But I'm not outside of you. So therefore, I don't have the name you. When you call me a you interrupt my, you transgress my yichud. My yichud, my unity is so great that I have no reality. I have nothing outside of me, and I am my own awareness. But when you refer to me as a you, you're making a big mistake. Rather, I am the inner you. I am your foundation. And the Bnei Shalom says, you cannot go to Olam Haba. You know why you can't go to Olam Haba? Because that's a Toras. And Olam Haba does not tolerate a Toras. It's one thing to have an Olam Hazeh where you make a mistake. You say to God, me, you. You talk to God like he's outside. He's separate from you. And you say to him, do me a favor, do this for me, do that for me. You're talking to God as outside. But that's a sheker v'chazav. God is not outside of you because there's nothing outside of him. So how can you be outside of him? But you feel like you're outside. So what the Bnei Shalom says to you, you feel like you're outside. And I'm not going to remove that. I'm not going to say, I have given you that gift. From my self-awareness, I have given you a little bit of your self-awareness. So in that, you feel that you have a certain identity which is somewhat outside of me. But it's not really. And in Olam Haba, you can't do that. You cannot believe that I'm a you. If you believe that I'm a you believe that you can call me a you, like I'm totally outside, that's a sheker on my yichud. And Olam Haba will not tolerate you. What will not tolerate you? My yichud. In other words, I will annihilate you. Because when you have your self-awareness and you think that I'm outside of you, that is the reason why you will be annihilated. And to be annihilated means not to exist anymore. So therefore, I have to correct that. We have to harmonize. There's a certain pressure between you and me. We're at odds with each other. Me, God, and you. Because you think I'm a you. That won't tolerate Olam Haba. So you have to fix it. I can't fix it for you. Because I fix it for you, then I'm outside of you. If I fix you, I'm outside of you, separate from you. And there's nothing outside of me. So therefore, you have to fix this yourself. And once you fix this, then you will be zoicha to go to Olam Haba, which is a condition of emes to such a degree that it will not tolerate the sheker of calling God a you. This is a very fundamental idea. So what can you remove? You can't remove the you. So you say to God, but I have to call you a you. It feels to me like you're outside of me. So the Bnei Shalom says, okay, I'll tolerate that. I'll tolerate that I'm somewhat differentiated from you. You know, but I'm not outside. You cannot call me a you. You have to see me as an inner you, an inner me. And therefore I will put you into a world and I will give you the illusion of everything outside. In other words, Olam Haba is not like this world. You see, you have to understand, this world has something called time. Time, what is time? Past, present, and future. Time simply means change. Something which is a certain way in the past is a different thing in the future. So time implies change. But you have no avodah. If you're not supposed to do anything, you don't have any time. If the Baruch Shem doesn't need you to change by changing what you call me, then you have nothing to do. I don't need time. So you will exist outside of time. Space. What is space? You see it? Space, I have a certain space between me and all of you. And what does that tell me? That tells me we're different. You're there and I'm here. Here, there. That implies two people. So in order for me to see myself as separate from you, there has to be a space between us on some level. If there's some kind of space between us, then I see we're two people. So space gives me the ability to think that you're outside of me. God created time to give you the ability to change. God created space to give the illusion that you're two separate beings. But you're not really. In Olam Haba, we're not outside of each other. We are an organism. So just like the liver and the heart are in one body, you and me will be in one body, in one organism. All of Klal Yisrael. That's why it says Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Lazeh. Why should it say Arevim? Why do I have to worry about another Jew? Why? I don't even know he's Jewish. If I see a Jew walking down the street and I don't know, I never saw him from Adam. I never saw him. So why do I have to be responsible for him? Why? Well, I'm supposed to do chesed. Why? I don't know who he is. I don't know where he is, what he does, anything. Why do I have to do that? Why do I have to look out for another Jew? Because the Baruch Shem says, the reason is because you are that Jew. You are an organism. In other words, the liver has to look out for the heart. But they're part of one body. If the liver doesn't look out for the heart, or the brain, or the lungs, the person is dead. So in an organism, each separate unit, each separate organ cannot exist on its own. It can only exist in partnership with everything else. That's why it knows everything else. And that's what the Baruch Shem says about you. In Olam Haba, will never be a table like this where we're all sitting over there. That's not what is in Olam Haba. In Olam Haba, we have no time. Because none of us will ever change again. We will formulate what we are and who the Baruch Shem is, and that would be fixed. That's constant. In Olam Haba, there's no space, because we don't need space to show that we're different. There'll be a slight difference, but fundamentally we are an organism, so we're all connected to each other. And that's why the Baruch Shem hates sinas chinam, because sinas chinam destroys the achdus, the yichud of Klal Yisrael. And finally, one more thing that the Baruch Shem will destroy that does not exist in Olam Haba. You know what doesn't exist in Olam Haba? Action. You can't do anything in Olam Haba. You can't do an action, because an action is a movement through time, which is called I'm acting, I'm doing something in the past and the future. But in Olam Haba, there is no actions, there's no movement. I'm not changing it all. I do not change in Olam Haba. I am fixed forever, outside of time, outside of space, and outside of action. So what is in Olam Haba? What is it? Pure self-awareness and an achdus of Klal Yisrael that we cannot begin to be teufus. And that's called nitzchias. What's nitzchias? Olam Haba is not what? 1,000,000 years. It doesn't last for 1,000,000,000 years. It doesn't last for 1,000,000,000,000 years. Olam Haba exists outside of time. There's no such thing as yesterday. Yesterday something happened. There's no yesterday. There's no tomorrow. You see it. Now we cannot understand this. We cannot relate this, because time, space, and actions all have to do with the physical universe. And it also has to do with the spiritual universe. In the spiritual universe, there's time. Because we say in the Neshama's in Gehenna for 11 months. So there's time and there's space. One malach knows another malach. One Neshama knows another Neshama. There's a concept of space and there's a concept of action. A malach does a certain action. But in Olam Haba, none of this exists, because there's no tikkun. There's no tikkun of Namlik Sufa. What do we mean by that? You don't have to disappear. All you have to do is do the mitzvahs. Why? So this is the final yesod of Nam Niksufa. How does the Baruch Shem get rid of your Nam Niksufa? If Nam Niksufa is the reason why you are physical and why you have to do mitzvahs, why you exist in time, why you exist in space, and why you have to do actions, if that's through the Nam Niksufa, how do you get rid of it? I can't get rid of myself. I am forced to see you as you. Because if I see me as me, you therefore have to become not me or you. I can't get rid of that. If I get rid of that, I get rid of myself. My consciousness, my whole identity disappears. The presence of my self-awareness dictates that I see you as outside of me, as a separate being. And in order for me to get rid of that, you see it? I have to disappear. So the Baruch Shem says, no, you will not disappear. And I will tell you how you get rid of it. What is the greatest mitzvah in the Torah? Of all Taryag mitzvahs, what's the biggest one of all? What? No? What's the biggest mitzvah in Chashivas? And it's the tachas of a yid. What? No. I say you're using the stuff you learn in the yeshivas and so on, but you don't realize none of this is critical. There's one mitzvah which is the center of a yid. What? Amunah B'Hashem? No. Love. V'ahavta es Hashem l'kacha. That's it. What does that mean? Because the Baruch Shem says to you, you have to love me because I love you. Well, what is this? Love? I never heard of this. What is this, a romance novel of some sort? What does the Baruch Shem mean when he says, I love you and you love me? And that's your Yeshua, that's your Tikkun. Because you know what love is? What is really love? Love exists when two beings were once one. Adam Rishon and Chava were once together as one person, and then they were separated. One was made the Zochar and one was made the female. What happens if you take something which is one and separate them into two? What suddenly happens? They have a desire to get back together. They want to reunite. Love is nothing more when one thing which was separated into two want to reunite. And that's a tremendous idea. So the Baruch Shem say, you know why you love me? Because you want to reunite with me. And we are an organism together. You're not simply outside of me. So therefore, in a certain sense, we want to unite in a certain, and that's called the Vekas. What's the biggest mitzvah? Voice Sidvok. What does that mean, voice Sidvok? What does that mean? I have to attach myself to them. It's not attachment, it's love. The Baruch Shem says to you, you can love me because you were once me. You were in me, and I brought you out of me. I derived you, but you still have the impulse to get back in. You know, I once saw in a book a very interesting idea. There was a woman that was talking to two men, and she was engaged to one, and she wanted to change it and get engaged to the other. So she described the way she felt about the two men. She said to the man that she was engaged to, I love you, but when I love you, I don't feel like you're part of me. I feel you're another person, and I love you. But this guy, I feel he's part of me. You understand that concept? I feel like, what do you mean? It's like I love myself. He's a piece of me. When you see another person and you feel that other person is a piece of you, he's like from you on the inside, that's the true earmark of love. And if you don't have that, you don't really have love yet. So I don't know if you love anyone in your life. I can't tell. Well, not unless I speak to you. But that's what it is. I don't even know if you love your wife. I have no idea. She could be your roommate, or she could be someone, you like her. But liking is not love. Love is when you see the person, you don't see another one. You see a piece of you. And that's what the Baruch Shem says. When you see me, I want you to love me. What do you mean? That you can actually feel that I'm not outside of you, I am you. And we are united in this way. That's why the greatest mitzvah of all is love. And when you have loved me, that's the end of Nam D'Ksufa. Because even though you will be somewhat outside, in a way, you will see me a stick outside, but you'll see me not as a you'll see me as an inner me. You're the inside of me. In other words, I will be much closer to you than before. And that's the concept of love. And that's the tachlis of a yid. The tachlis of a yid, I'm sorry to say, is not to learn Torah. It's not. The tachlis of Torah is to show you what the Rebbeinu Shem wants, that he wants you to love him. After Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, how do you know that he's one? What shows you that God is one? It means that he's one with you. Why? Because he wants you to love him. I mean, did anyone ever think in those terms? We don't think of God in those terms. We think of a sugya. We think of a Gemara. I understand pshat. But is this becoming a yid? No. Love is a certain relationship that you have with God. It's a relationship. And God wants you to have that relationship. And if you don't have that relationship, which is true in most of the cases, you had better get that relationship. And that's the avoid of your life. By the end of your life, God wants to know that by doing the mitzvahs, even though you don't want to do it, you did it because he said so. Why? Because he is you. And the Rebbeinu Shalom will not tolerate anything less. I'm sorry to say. Olam Haba is the place where love exists. And that's a stira. Olam Haba is really a stira. Because we say if A equals B, then B equals A. But this is not true of Olam Haba. Because even though God says to you, what does God say to you in Olam Haba? What is he going to say to you? He's going to say to you this: I am you. I, the Rebbeinu Shalom, am you. Because you're not outside of me. So therefore I'm you. But you are not me. How's that possible? If I am you, you should be me. In fact, in Hinduism, they believe that the Brahman, who's God, that the Atman, who's the soul, then the Brahman are one. Man is God. But that's a shtus. Man is not God. But what the Rebbeinu Shalom says, I am you. But you are not me, because you have the gift of a self, where you're aware of yourself outside of me. And in that sense, I'll tolerate. But since you love me, you will not be disempowered. What do you mean by disempowered? It means you will not feel chalisha. When I feel myself, and then I say you, I feel disempowered. Because I feel like I am existence, I am total existence. So when I feel that there's something outside of me, I feel abgeschwacht. There's something else. There's me and not me. And that's a feeling of disempowerment. And that's what Nam D'Ksufa, that's what Busha means. Busha means disempowerment. I feel abgeschwacht, cholosh. Why? Because how can I have something outside of me? If I'm a self and I am aware and I create my own existence, how can I feel there's something outside? But I do. So I have a chalisha. So the Rebbeinu Shalom says, no, if you love me, you will not feel a chalisha. Because the fact that I'm outside of you, that will not make you cholish. Why? Because you will feel like I'm part of you. You will have my being in you. And therefore you will not feel cholish, even though you feel that I'm outside of you slightly. That's the solution to Nam D'Ksufa. And that's why the Rebbeinu Shalom technically can't get rid of Nam D'Ksufa. Because as soon as he made you, you see him as you. And that's Nam D'Ksufa, that you see somebody outside of you and you feel a chalisha. The Rebbeinu Shalom can't get rid of that without removing you, without getting rid of the person who says, me, you. So the Rebbeinu Shalom says, you can't get rid of this. But if you love me, if you do the mitzvahs and you're dovik to me and you feel that I'm part of you, that will take away your chalisha. Because I'm part of you and therefore you don't feel cholish. So what cures Nam D'Ksufa is v'ahavta as Hashem elakacha al pi emes. And only Olam Haba, which has that madrega, you can't feel this in Olam Hazeh. You can't. You feel mama separated from God. Me, you. But in Olam Haba, which is the Olam Emes, the yichud of the Rebbeinu Shalom is so powerful, it's so clear, that if you defy that yichud and you say to the Rebbeinu Shalom, me, you, poof, you're gone. You cannot defy the absolute yichud of the Rebbeinu Shalom. So the way to get around it, the way to feel a little bit outside of him and still survive, is to love him. Because when you love him, you feel he is you. Presto, you've solved Nam Sufa. So now we understand why the Rebbeinu Shalom wants you to love him. So what you have to do, unfortunately, is you sit and learn all day. And I say this is unfortunately, because this is not what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants. He wants your learning to lead to love. If you learn all day long and you're a masmid gadol, good for you. You have not reached the level of what God wants. God wants your hafted Hashem lekacha b'chol nvavecha v'chol nafshecha v'chol moyodecha. So what do you think? You think the Rebbeinu Shalom joking with you? You think this is a game? How does he describe that love? B'chol moyodecha v'chol nafshecha. He says you have to love me, really love me with all your heart. You have to really feel like I'm part of you. And then you will not feel this chalish anymore. And the whole purpose of Olam Hazeh is to give you mitzvahs. And the whole purpose of Olam Hazeh is to give you an ability to love me. And only this will take away the toes that you think I'm outside of you. Now I know this all sounds strange. And in a certain sense, I apologize.
How do the mitzvahs do this?
What's that?
What do the mitzvahs bring the Hava?
Tayag mitzvahs.
Why does it bring a Hava? Think about the Rebbeinu.
Because it brings Ahava. Because you see, if you understand that you are from the Rebbeinu Shalom, in other words, you don't exist on yourself. You don't exist on your own. You exist as from coming from Him. And then when you do lemaisa, things that He wants, but things that you don't want to do. Look, I heard people tell me, I don't experience myself, lobster is the most delicious food. Now I don't know if that's true or not. You know, I've never eaten lobster. You know, but I feel bad that I've never eaten lobster. You know, so I'd like to eat a piece of lobster to see how it tastes. It's supposed to be incredible. You know, but the reason why don't I eat lobster? No, it's not a joke. Why don't I eat lobster? Because the Rebbeinu Shalom said no. That's the only reason. Otherwise, I'd be eating lobster all day long. That's the way it is. In other words, the Yahrtzeit is my bracha. I want to follow the Yahrtzeit. I want to do what it says. Why? Because I have a taiva. I'm boss of a dom. But I don't do the follow taiva. Why? Because I understand who God is. And I understand that commandi of tavovid. In the end, it is the Rebbeinu Shalom who is the only thing that exists, and my existence is from Him, and all the Kessin and so on He does to me is so eventually one day I will share Olam Haba in His world, where there's no time, there's no space, and there's no actions.
Isn't the path getting to Hashem only through learning? You can't, and Amoritz doesn't have that path to get there.
Look,
you have to learn to get there.
Well, that's.
You can't snap a finger.
I'm sorry. That's not really true. You know, I'll tell you why. What is the difference between a religious person and a spiritual person? I ask you this question. Sometimes you say this person is very spiritual, but he's not religious, and this person is very religious, but he's not very spiritual. Somebody tell me the difference.
It's religion with meaning.
What?
How could you be religious?
Spirituality is religion with meaning.
Oh, a religious person is somebody, you know, they say it's a joke, but they say, what's the difference between the Hasidim and the Misnagdim? It's a joke, but that's what they say. The Misnagdim keep the Tayag mitzvahs because Azoy state in the Shulchan Aruch. That's religion. The Hasidim keep the Tayag mitzvahs because Azoy hates the Rebbeinu Shalom. Do you understand? A religious person follows all the commandments, the rituals and ceremonies, what the religion says. Shabbos, kashrus, these are all rituals and ceremonies. But what is
the question? Can an Amoritz have Hashem?
Yes.
Impossible.
You're mistaken.
Impossible.
Of course.
How do you know what Hashem is even?
Because he sees the universe. He understands the godless of the Bnei Shalom. He understands the toiv of the Bnei Shalom. He understands this without the Torah. In fact, the chukim he can't figure out. But all the mishpatim, the mitzvahs that have a reason, he would be able to do this on his own.
Why wasn't Tarek mitzvahs? Why didn't he just tell us the law of the Abraham? This other malachim becomes spiritual.
So the answer to that, good question. What's the answer to that? Adam Arishan, did he have Taryag mitzvahs?
Is it fair to say that Avram Avinu was a Moritz and he still had a Havas Hashem?
Avram Avinu loved God because he saw who God was. He had no Torah. I'm sorry. When he was 3 years old, he saw the Shemayim, he saw the heavens. Look at the Medrash says he had no Torah.
He didn't need it, but we do need it.
Wait a minute. You're saying, do you need Torah or not? You could develop a love of God because you understand who He is and what He means to you. If He helps you in your life,
how
and
would you get to Torah? The guy in the street doesn't have
okay.
Just doesn't happen. It can't happen. It doesn't happen. You can say it's nice, assuming sun, moon, weather, rain.
No, it's not that. It's not that simple. Mankind for the first 2,000 years had no Torah.
Impossible.
But
Okay.
he had Avos Hashem when he was still in Amoritz. Then you learn. He started off with Avos Hashem.
The
When he
Rambam
was still in Amoritz.
What the Rabbi was saying, the description of really the Rabbi.
What's the answer? Why do you need it?
If you look at the Animam, if you look at the Animam, it's exactly what he says. Ain't no goof, ain't no singular goof. So I mean that's basically what the Rambam's description of the Vishnu. Well, I don't know what's
The Rambam's description of the Bnei Shalom is far greater than Ein Lo Guf.
No, I'm stuck in the middle of it. I mean, look at the Shlosh Esrei.
Fundamentally, like I said, is if you understand the Bnei Shalom from the Bria, and you understand from the Bnei Shalom's actions in your life as toiv, and all the miracles He does for you, and all the good things, there are many people who say they feel a love for God, and they don't know any Torah at all. And does that mean they're lying? No, they have a love for God. But the difference is this, that even though they have a love of God, it's not the highest level of love. Because what the Torah does, it gives you not only a madrega of love, it gives you a shlemus. Because the neshama has taryag gevorim, it has taryag organs in the neshama, and in order to masakin those organs, it's makayim taryag mitzvahs. So there's a certain shlemus that the taryag mitzvahs gives, but it does not necessarily have to give the fundamental things of love. You see it, and this is a very important concept.
What was it? What you said before between the luchas rishonos and luchas shniyos? Before the eight, what was in the luchas rishonos? You said the luchas shniyos already was different. That's what we have today.
The luchas rishonos was a nun sharabina.
Where do you see that?
You don't see it. It's never given to us. It's hidden in the Kabbalah.
I understand that, but you look in the Pasuk Sukkim, you don't see that contrast between the luchas rishonos and luchas shniyos.
Well, that doesn't mean it's not there. In fact, it is there. The Kabbalah says very clearly. I mean, you don't realize what the Kabbalah says.
On the surface, you don't see it.
Okay. Well, you don't see a lot with the Torah. The Torah is not Megala itself. That doesn't mean it's not there. So what I'm saying fundamentally is that the tikkun of Dam Sufa lies in the actions of love.
No, I understand that.
You see? Okay. I heard enough. Okay, I understand that.
Shimon, what about Yisurim? How did Yisurim play a role? You started off the whole year that they were full of pain. So how's the?
Well, let me ask you a question. If a person does a chait, let's say eat something treif, and so on. According to the Midas Hadin, what should happen to him? What?
Instructions for
Hebrew.
Yes, because I taught you that. Why?
I have to be coming for a while.
For quite a while. Why is that? If a person does a chait, what the real consequence of a chait is annihilation. He's completely put out of business. Why? Because when you do a sin, you're fundamentally unplugging yourself from the kiyum that you get from the Bnei Shalom. You exist because God gives you that energy. And if you unplug yourself from God, poof, you're gone. So what allows you to continue is the Midas HaRachamim. The Midas HaRachamim allows you to have Yisuin, and the Yisuin makes you an Onav. Because when you have Yisuin, you cannot feel like you're God, because then you feel you're powerless. Only a Baal Gaiva can be a Choyte. That's why the Rebbeinu Shem says in the Torah, why does a person, every Baal Chait is always what? And he believes that he's a piece of God. Why? But he has the power of a little piece of God. Why? Because he says, I'm independent of God. And he pulls himself out of God. So what the Rebbeinu Shem does, he gives him Yisuim. And he gives him Yisuim, he sees that he's not in control. And when you realize that you're not in control of your life, you forcefully become an Onav. And then you start to think again about the Rebbeinu Shalom.
You mentioned the sun and the moon. Well, when the other planets have no awareness. In the beginning, you mentioned that.
So?
But I'm saying that you see that the sun and the moon did get into some kind of awareness, Ramchal Sagadol. So where did they get that from?
That's
the sun and the moon.
It's a certain type of.
So where did that awareness come from?
It's a Mashalom. These are Mashalom.
Session is no longer being recorded.
What does it mean so much?
Oh. In any case, so therefore we see this. So in other words, well, we see that we have, to finish, we see that we have a certain Yediyah from the Nun Sharabina, which is with us, but it does not contain, it's in Golus. The Nun Sharabina that was given to us was not given to us in a revealed way because we won't Zocha. It was not given to us b'shleimus. It's all hidden in Mishalom. Finally, the Ramchal was the first one that began to reveal the Nimshol. And in the end, the Mashiach will reveal the complete Nimshol. And we will know everything in our life and every connection that we have. But what I'm trying to say, the Kabbalah also left out a lot of very important topics. The main topic, which is what? Which is the concept of Nam D'Ksufa, which is the whole reason why the thing started. So therefore, what I'm giving you is my understanding of what Nam D'Ksufa, and I realize it's a little difficult to understand. It's true. And you have to think of this thing. But the one thing is this, that there are two types of entities. There's an entity which exists, it participates in a process called existence, but there's another type of existence which is self-awareness, and that's the existence of God, except that with God, He and His awareness are the same thing. Not like we who say, I know myself. That I know myself with reality as a frame of reference. So we have a much deeper understanding what the Rebbeinu Shem is.
How do you know that yourself and your wellness are, as a human, are separate as opposed to fused?
Is there a process in the Bina, which means to say that
I want to.
for 40 days until Luke broke loose.
Wait. What I want to do is I want to end this year on this note that we should finally all be zoicha one day to have the Nun Sharabina, and we should be zoicha to have it completely with a complete understanding, and to realize the godless of who the Rebbeinu Shem is, which will be korev to what we will be in Olam Haba. But until that time, we have to suffer through much lower levels, and we have to do the best we can. The more Torah we learn, like the gentleman is pointing out, the higher we go. I'm not saying we don't go high, but I'm saying it still doesn't replace love. There's a
maybe that brings to love. The higher you go in Torah, the greater measure of love you will attain by learning.
But to love God is the fundamental object of what it has to be. Okay, please.
Why can't HaKadosh Baruch Hu make that awareness? Why can't HaKadosh Baruch Hu make that the self can recognize that he's really part of the Eibishter and he wants to fuse together. Why can't Hashem take away
Create us with the
Ksufa?
love. Create us with that love.
Why can't you make the recognition?
Why couldn't he have
I'm my
made
own
us
self,
with that
but my
love?
inner self is like God Baruch Hu, and I want to connect with him. Why can that take away Knaimim? I didn't understand the text. He answered, but I wasn't understanding
You're
what
a
he said.
created entity.
The Yates, the Bonachim, it says where does the Yetzirah come from? Where does it come from? So it says the Bonachim created the Yetzirah. No, he didn't. Self. Because the self realizes that it has a certain awareness which makes God out. So it believes it's godly. So therefore it doesn't have to attach itself to God. It can go on its own. That's the Yetzirah. That you can exist without God.
But if we are
But that's another share. You know what I mean?
If we're a derived entity,
What's that?
if we're a derived entity, we're a chalak kalima, well, why isn't our neshama and existence fused?
Because if you are a self, you always see something outside of you as a you, and therefore you will always feel a
But if we
chalisha.
got it from the Rebbeinu Shalom,
No,
why isn't it the same?
it doesn't, it's what it is. It feels,
Because
I understand what you're saying, but you feel outside of him, and you can't repel that idea.
but that feeling that you're outside of us because you are derived, and so once you become outside,
But you don't feel the derivation. You feel the derivation, but you don't feel the connection. So there's a chalisha.